Guy Boucher out behind the bench, and what are we hearing as for who the Leafs might be targeting on the back end and free agency? We'll get to all that plus some more mailbag questions on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. What's going on, Dave? How was your weekend? What'd you get up to?
Well, I had a CFL documentary screening that I went to. For those who are CFL fans, on former running back Andrew Harris. Was not what I was expecting to watch. So I think it's going to be out on like most streaming platforms like Prime and Apple TV. So anyone looking for a new documentary, I recommend that one.
Any big fish down there that you got to rub elbows with?
The usual Tim McAuliffe, Cabby, your boy Aaron Corolla over at TSN there.
Oh, AK gets himself in those places. Matty Cause, I'm sure he had himself a drink or two.
I have to post. I still haven't posted like the photos from the evening, but I had this very nice like baby blue sport coat that I've been wearing to wear.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it looked pretty snazzy until I turned around. Literally, like two guys after me on the red carpet was Pinball Clements, who looked
like $1 million.
$2 million.
Yeah. Pinball's a good dude. I like Pinball. He's a good guy. He could probably run for mayor of the city and get elected, to be honest with you, if you really wanted to. 100%. He's the king of this city. Speaking of the kings of the sports world, though, unfortunately, it's not the Argos as much as, we like the Argos. It's the Leafs world and everyone else just living in it, brother. So we'll get to a couple of news and notes that we heard over the weekend. Then we'll get back into answering some of your guys' mailbag questions. Still a bunch that we didn't get to on the last episode on Friday. So if you missed that, make sure you go back and listen. We got a lot of questions, some great ones. We got like 20-something submissions and some really good questions, and we did our best to answer them. So go check out part 1 from Friday, and we'll continue with that a little bit later on today. But let's start with the news of the weekend, I guess, in Maple Leaf land, and that's that the team announced that Guy Boucher will not be back with the Toronto Maple Leafs. What do you make of this news?
I'm kind of waiting for it. I think people would have been so disappointed if he was back next year, just the way that the power play just went off the 18. Let's call that one the 18 Miller, I guess, in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, it was what, like 4% come play in round 1. Yeah, that's pretty garbage.
Don't know many coaches that could survive that level of mediocrity when it comes to the. I mean.
No, but especially after Sheldon Keefe got fired, it's like, I don't know how many coaches, like new coaches, going to come in and be like, yeah, that guy had the power play cooking. Let's keep him on board. I'm surprised it took this long for him to get relieved of his duties, to be honest with you.
I think there was a bit of a report that he was kind of hoping to be in the running for the Leafs gig, like the head coaching gig.
Well, that doesn't surprise me just because, like, before Babcock, remember, he was, considered the front runner until Babs was like, actually, I'm not going to go to Buffalo. I'm going to go to Toronto. And, that's how that all kind of ended up happening. And then eventually Boucher found his way back here last year as an assistant, kind of filling in for Spencer Carberry. He was the power play coach. And I mean, when you go 4% on the power play and then the head honcho, Sheldon Keefe, gets sent packing, yeah, it was only a matter of time, I think, before he was shown the door as well. So Guy Boucher, no more. Now, Mike Van Ryn still has yet to be relieved of his duties. Like, I don't know if this is reading into it too much, but at this point, it feels likely that Van Ryn might be retained and will probably be behind the bench for the Maple Leafs under Craig Berube as well here.
I mean, the fact that we haven't heard his name leave, like the only reason why some of these guys maybe you don't hear anything just yet is maybe they're interviewing elsewhere if they have the opportunity to. Sheldon Keefe, his coaching staff is filled out, so none of those guys. I don't even think a single Leaf assistant or coach went and joined Keefe's staff, which is I find a little interesting.
Which I didn't even see any big names end up joining.
Former Blackhawks coach is
Colton.
Colton is there. That was like the most notable name that I saw on that list. So
we played together years ago, Colton and Sheldon Keefe.
Yeah, so like that, maybe that's something to wait. Maybe we're kind of waiting for, but yeah, I mean, I think at this point it wouldn't surprise me if Van Ryan's back. I don't even know how the Leafs are gonna handle they already made one assistant hire. Are they just gonna announce the rest of the staff? Are they gonna do individual hires for the ones that are leaving? Because now you got Boucher, you got Malholtra's gone. And
yeah, I don't know. Like Malhotra wasn't doing a whole lot. Like he was kind of just there, Like he had a contract, he showed up to work, and he was pretty much helping the guys win faceoffs. Like he's like the faceoff specialist in a way. It's like he didn't run the power play, he didn't run the penalty kill, he didn't run forward or defense. Like what would you say you do here? But either way, he's not here anymore. I don't know if they necessarily need to like replace everybody though. Like he was kind of just there. You know what I mean? Like I do think that we will see one other guy for sure join this staff. Like it's not just going to be Lane Lambert and Mike Van Ryan. I don't think, especially with Lambert being an associate coach, we'll probably see another guy come in. And Mark Savard's still out there. Like I know there was that report about him possibly leaving for junior when he left Calgary, but maybe he comes back and he ends up, signing with the Leafs. Perhaps it's definitely a possibility, but we'll kind of see what ends up happening there. Really interesting report also over the course of the weekend. Nick Kyprios wrote a column talking about two top defensemen that the Maple Leafs look to be targeting, Brandon Montour and our guy, Chris Tanev. How much are the people in the comments going to hate that the Leafs are now specifically linked to Chris Tanev, you think?
I mean, yeah, based on the comments, they feel like we're going to have like a doctor just on staff for Chris Tanev because the guy gets hurt all the time.
Well, that and he's like, oh, too old, too. So I'm like, that they treat this guy like he's like a geriatric.
He's not Mark Giordano, guys. Like he's not in his 40s.
I feel okay if this is the case. I mean, you bring both these two players in, that would certainly bolster your blue line. My concern would be the dollar for Montour and how much money that would take to get him. Like, I assume he's going to be a hot commodity. So
yeah,
I'll reserve judgment. Say it again.
Right shot, two-way defenseman with one that can move the puck.
Yeah,
those tend to go pretty expensive.
Can run the power play, put up how many points last year? Like 70 something points last season for Florida. Like the dude's unbelievable. 2 straight cup finals, knows how to play come playoff time. Yeah, I could see why he'd be an attractive piece for the Maple Leafs. But again, that dollar figure is going to be where it's got to make sense. Like for Brandon Montour, what's a deal that you think you'd be happy with? Like if he signs, I don't know, 6 times 6, you happy with it?
Oh, 1,000%. Like I don't even think that's what it's going to take, though. I think he wasn't going to want north of 7.
Yeah, you're right. You probably are right. So okay,
Riley's got 7.5.
Yeah. So what if Montour gets the same contract? 6 times 7.5.
I wouldn't like how the back end of that contract looks because he's not young, but he's not old either. But at the same time, like you have to start putting some money towards the blue line, and you might have to overpay a bit to get him. How
long do you think until that contract doesn't look good? Like probably year 5 and 6, let's say. Like he probably still has 3 to 4 years of like prime hockey, still solid hockey in him, you would think, right?
Yeah, he's only played 520 career games. Like he hasn't played That's a significant amount of games, but it's not like
Mm.
he's, up there in terms of games played either.
Well, I think my point more so is, like, ultimately, this team is in a window that's
Yeah.
only 3 or 4 years in, 5 years max, right? Like, you've got Matthews for another 5 years. If you don't win a championship within those 5 years, I mean, who knows what happens with this organization? So, I mean, if you're 6 and 7 are crap, who cares? The 5 years that you can get him, and you have to give him those extra, but the 5 years you get him will be worth it, I think. As long as the AAV is right. The term doesn't scare me as much as the AAV will. I think that there's a question in here about Brandon Montour in the mailbag. So why don't we take a break? And then let's come back and let's get back into our mailbag questions. We still got a bunch of them that we got to get to. And I'm excited for it. So it's coming up on the other side. It's Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Policy Genius. A lot of life is unpredictable, but a good life insurance plan gives your family a financial safety net to protect against some of the unknowns. Policy Genius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It makes choosing the right policy for you and your family easy and quick. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million in coverage. Some options are 100% online and let you avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policy Genius helps you easily compare your options from America's top insurers in just a few clicks. Your work-life insurance may not offer enough protection for your family's needs, or even worse, it may not come with you if you leave your job. Policy Genius has no incentive to recommend one insurer over the other, so you can trust their guidance. They've got thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who found the best fit for their needs. Get peace of mind by finding the right life insurance with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti with you as we are each and every weekday, 5 shows a week here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. You can find it on YouTube and also wherever you download or stream your podcasts at Spotify, iTunes, wherever you find your pods. You can find Locked On Leafs. All right, let's continue with the mailbag. As I said before, this is part 2, I guess, of the mailbag. Part 1 was on Friday, so you can go back and listen to that show. Lots of great questions, and we did our darndest to answer the questions, I guess, for you guys. So let's continue. First one here. Let's pull this up. Was it this one here? Yeah. All right, first one from David Little 949. Is Easton Cowan ready to enter the big leagues? It's a question that we all have, and a question that I know I'm certainly excited to find out next year. I don't know if I confidently know the answer to that quite yet. I think he's close. I think he's going to be a good player. But I guess we need to see him against real NHL talent before saying he's 100% ready for the show.
Yeah, we didn't get a chance to really see him in those NHL. Like, you saw him preseason, but we necessarily didn't see him against top NHL players. Like, similar to Fraser Minton. He looked good in preseason. Then once he started playing regularly against top NHL competition, that's where you kind of get a true gauge of whether a prospect is ready. So I think he'll be ready if soon he continues that momentum through training camp and preseason. I think he's ready for the audition to play in the NHL. I just don't know if it would make the most sense to have him stick the entire year.
Yeah, I think there's no question to me that he's going to get the 9-game look at the very least. He's definitely going to get the 9-gamer, whether they stretch that out, whether he gets it up front, whether he goes past that and stays with the team for the year. I'm not completely sure how they're going to go about it, but they'll definitely give him a good hard look. He's earned it based on the way that he played in London this year. I mean, he was the OHL MVP, playoff MVP, and then he, came up big. They lost ultimately in the Memorial Cup final, but He was the best player for his team there as well. So, is he good enough to get there? Yeah, probably. I think the one concern that most people have and that I have after watching him in the Memorial Cup, I wanted to make sure that I got, my eyes on him and watch him for a couple of full games so I could, formulate an opinion on the player. My concern is a little bit of the size. I do understand those concerns because I think when I was watching, there were a few times where he had the puck and he was easily bumped off it, like a little bit of contact by someone a little bigger than him, and he was kind of bumped off. Now the good thing is his recovery was great, and he was able to kind of steal the puck back. But I'm not sure you could quite going to be able to do that as much at the NHL level. So if you get bumped off the puck there, I mean, these guys are so quick; they're already up the ice by the time you even realize, and you're able to get your stick in motion to try and get it back. So a little bit more, I guess. Lower level strength, a little bit more sturdiness on his skates. I think that would go a long way for him, and that's what I'd be working on this offseason if I were Easton Cowan. A little more power skating just to give you a little bit more steadiness when you're out there carrying the puck.
Well, I just think that's going to be the big part of development camp too for him.
Yeah.
Getting those sessions in, assuming he'll be at the rookie tournament as well. I hope, but it could change. Like if the Leafs decide they want to give him a real long look, they're going to have to watch how many games he plays as well, right? Because he had a very long year. Like he did the rookie, he did development camp, rookie tournament, training camp, preseason, OHL season, Memorial Cup, and now he can't even work on the damn farm with his family. I don't know if you saw that story. His dad's like, yeah, I can't even ask the guy to work on the farm because he's kind of been busy trying to be a pro hockey player.
Or yeah, he's busy being living his life, trying to be a pro athlete. I'll say this though, the one thing that's maybe different about him than maybe some other guy like a Nick Robertson, let's say, when he was 19. Easton Cowan, like due to his tenacity in the defensive end and his defensive awareness and reliability in his own end, he can play a bottom six role, I believe. Yeah. So it doesn't necessarily have to be top six or bust. So that's something that else is kind of going for him. They can easily find a spot in the lineup to get this guy some games and get a serious look at him throughout the preseason and then the first month of the regular season as well. So yeah, I'm excited to see what he can do. Hopefully he can break with the team. I think that'd be awesome to have a young 19-year-old player, cheap player, kind of break through and have a great rookie season. All right, next question. Let's see here. Oh boy, this one's tough. Ooh. This one is a bit tough. Top 10 players all time. Let's hear it. So I don't think we have time to do top 10, and that's just such a debate. So I think let's do top 5 instead. We can do a bit of a top 5.
Are we talking about now? Are we talking Leafs players? We talking all players?
Oh, I believe this is all. I mean, it says all time. I kind of assumed all players.
Yeah. Okay. When I saw that question, one of those probably should have clarified, but I believe that's where they're going with that.
Oh. Man, maybe they do mean Leafs. Like it is a Leafs podcast. It would make sense if they were asking Leafs as opposed to all players.
I think we should do it. But I think we should do an all players, like NHL all time.
Okay. Okay, you give me your 5 and I'll give you my 5.
All right, so my 5, I mean, Wayne Gretzky. Like tough to go against him. Top.
All time. Not going to get much debate here over that one, pal.
Number 2, I'm going Mario Lemieux.
Yeah, there's no debate there either. We're chalk 1-2.
Bobby Orr.
1, 2, 3, buddy. This is where I think things get interesting.
Yeah, it is where it kind of gets interesting. I'm going to put a goalie at 4.
Oh, what? A goalie?
Dominic Hasek.
Dude, okay. Give me your reasoning.
When you look back at his candidacy for the Hall of Fame, this guy was undoubtedly one of the top goaltenders. I think what kind of ruined a bit of his career at the end was the injuries. right? Because he really tried to stretch it out, especially during his time with Ottawa. But like early in his career, there wasn't a better goaltender in the NHL. Like guys have wins, but he was flat out dominant and didn't play on the best teams either.
He was fantastic. Like, don't get me wrong. There's an argument to be made that he's the greatest goaltender of all time, but I don't think it's a slam shut case, which is why I have an issue with putting him in the top 5. Just because I think you could also make the argument that Brodeur, Patrick Waugh, like one of those two guys, could easily slide in as like top goalie all time. So to put him in the top 5 to solidify and be like, yeah, he's leaps and bounds ahead of those guys is a little tough for me. But hey, it's your list, so you can do whoever you want for your list. Who's your 5th guy?
Jaromir Jagr.
So I debated on putting Jagr on my list, and I didn't. I left him off.
It was between Jagr and Gordie Howe, but I just think Jagr was just so dominant, especially his prime years. Like him and Lemieux were like during their heydays were like the best.
The
to think that those two guys were on the same team, disgusting.
I mean,
unreal.
It's like McDavid and Leon. Like it's Mess and Gretzky. Like it just. I mean, that one's a little less, but like it is pretty crazy though that like 2 of possibly the top 5 players ever are we're on the same team for the same era and won cups. And gosh, for the Pittsburgh Penguins to go into like Lemieux, Jagr, and then a few years later you have Crosby, Malkin for like the next generation. Unreal. Lucky son of a guns out there in Pittsburgh. I mean, we had to wait how long to get a Matthews Marner? Like, I don't think there's ever been a Matthews Marner or just a Matthews, I guess, in this team. Like, okay, Dougie was ish up there, but like he was never a top 5 player in the league. Sundin was never a top 5 player in the league. Matthews is that guy. Yeah. But yeah, no, that's a solid list. I think the only one that I don't have there, I guess, is Dom Hasek, and I think it's just because, again, I think it's too close to call between who's the best goalie between like those 3 guys, so I can't definitively put one in my top 5. This might be crazy, and I think that this guy's underrated.
Okay,
and it's Sidney Crosby. I have at number 4. I've got Gretzky, Lemieux, and I've got Sidney Crosby as the 4th best player all time, and then Gordie Howe at 5. I don't think Crosby gets enough love or enough credit, man. I really, really don't. Like, this dude, what he has been able to do throughout his career, he revived hockey, in a sense. Like, he was, 2nd, 3rd year in the NHL, captained his team to a Stanley Cup. Like, the next year, went back to the championship, won the Stanley Cup, retooled, won a couple more cups with Pittsburgh. He's got gold medals. He's like, the guy is legitimately so good. For years, he was the top player, MVP caliber every single season. And the thing that's different about Crosby than a guy like McDavid is that he was just as integral defensively as he was offensively. Like, this guy was a two-way beast and never got enough credit for it, in my opinion. So for me, I think Crosby's a top 5 player all time. I got him at 4. You could flip-flop Crosby, Howe. Jagr was right there as my honorable mention. But that's my list.
I'll say this about Crosby. Like, the fact that he is, like, a few years ago, a bit of an off year with 84 points, just back-to-back 90-point seasons in his, like, 35, 36 year. Like, you're not seeing guys doing that right now.
No, God, no.
Especially with the current crop of, like, how the game has changed with speed and all that and skating. He's proven to just be able to adapt to the game.
Dude, there was, like, a solid 2 weeks there where there was a possibility that Crosby was like inching his way into the MVP conversation. He was 36, 37 years old. Like, it's just unbelievable. The guy's aged like fine wine, man. And he's just so consistent year in, year out, still like at the top of his game all the time. and like just so clutch.
Which is why the talks of trading, like Pittsburgh trading him, was just so hilarious. Like
nonsense.
He is starting his career and he is ending his career there. Let's stop. That was mostly Avalanche fans trying to manifest that, by the way.
Although it would be kind of cool to see that trade kind of come through and see those two play together. All right, let's take one more quick break and then we'll come back and we'll finish up some more mailbag questions. We got a couple doozies about what maybe some trade and some free agent options. So we'll get to those on the other side. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, the Stanley Cup Finals, and more. You can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet on everything from the Finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park. And you could still technically bet who is going to win the Stanley Cup because the Edmonton Oilers staying alive the other night, and there's a game 5 coming up tomorrow or 2 days from tomorrow. It's tomorrow,
Tuesday,
and you can make that wager over on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti. We're continuing with our Locked On Leafs mailbag. And let's get right back into it with the next question here, Dave. It's from DAwesome2409. Is that like you, like D, like Dave Awesome? Is that?
I don't need to pump myself up. I got enough people in the comments doing that for me.
Okay. All right. Let's just go ahead and read this question here. Hi, Mike and Dave. I have a mailbag question for both of you to elaborate on. If Tree Living traded Liljegren, who would he trade? I should probably be able to see the rest of that. Who would he trade him for, or for, and how much? That is the question. So what would the return be, basically, for Timothy Liljegren?
Oh.
So we started
that discussion and we didn't really come up with a consensus, did we?
No, I mean, I think we just threw it out there, like, what would, I guess, a return be? And based on the fact that I don't really know what to value Liljegren at right now. Like, maybe a 3rd-round pick. Like, I think a 3rd-round pick might be what teams are willing to pay for him, right? Like, you're going to have to give him a contract, so you're going to have to pay the guy. I don't know. I think it probably like some team would be willing to roll the dice and see if Liljegren is able to, turn into that top 4 defenseman that at one point people thought he could become. Hasn't happened here in Toronto. Maybe change of scenery could kind of spark him, but I don't know if teams are going to be giving up top assets for him. Maybe a similar level prospect who's like, approaching their mid-20s and aren't necessarily, hitting the way that they thought they would, like a Liljegren-esque prospect for prospect swap, potentially hockey trade type of deal. But honestly, not a whole lot. I don't think Liljegren would be able to fetch on the open market.
Yeah, the problem is you're not doing like what the Sabres did, where they traded Middlestat for Byram. Like that's not happening.
No, we're Middlestat level return, no chance.
When we're talking about the fact that we're not sure if he's even going to be a top 4, maybe a top 6 defenseman with Craig Berube, like you're losing out on your leverage in any trade right now.
Yeah,
right. So I think you're better off taking the bet on him, maybe rebounding a bit for a year, and either getting yourself another good right shot defenseman in your lineup, or you finally figure out he just doesn't have it and you cut bait after another year. I think that's your best bet with them.
I agree. So if the best offer is like a 3rd-round pick, just keep him. See if you can if Berube can try and give him the change of scenery internally, I suppose, with a new coach in mind here. All right, next question from the Bat Dad 11. Hey guys, question. If Marner decides to play the season out and test free agency, should the Leafs accept that and play him all season, or should they sit him and try to force his hand? It would be hard sitting a player with that skill level, but the Leafs management have never shown a backbone, and this could be their opportunity to shed that reputation. Vegas is ruthless. Should the Leafs be as well? Someone's been reading a little too much of Daily Face-Off, I think. What do you say to this, Dave?
Man, like I don't know how the Leafs would get away with doing something like that. It would just not.
Well,
it'd be first off, you don't want to sit a Mitch Marner for really any reason other than injury, right? We're not talking about a Jack Eichel situation here.
It's a preposterous suggestion, and I mean, when I said someone's been reading too much Daily Face-Off, I mean, this has basically been suggested for the last month from Frank Saravalli. Like, the Leafs could get ruthless here. They could do this and that. Sure, they could, technically. They're not going to. No team has ever done that with a star player. And this individual, I forget who, the Bat Dad, brings up Vegas being ruthless. Vegas has traded a lot of players, and yes, they've cut bait with guys, but it was always in the offseason. It was never like, all right, we're going to sit you until you say, all right, fine, trade me. Like, this was always off-season deals. Like, I went back and I looked at every big trade that the Vegas Golden Knights have made in their entire existence. All of them came in the summer. Every single one of them was an off-season trade. Whether it was Riley Smith last year, Pacioretty the year before that, Marc-Andre Fleury, Nate Schmidt, like every single time they moved a player out to try and make money, make the money work, it was always an off-season summer deal. So, Vegas has never done this to anyone where they've sat the player. So I don't know why all of a sudden people think that the Leafs need to do this to be ruthless like Vegas. Vegas has never been that ruthless. They've traded the guy in the offseason, and that's what I think the Maple Leafs should try to do if they're going to move on from Mitch Marner. But yeah, I to answer the question, should they sit Mitch Marner to try and be ruthless and force him out of the city? Hell no. That is a terrible suggestion. You're going to play the guy. What do? You're going to tank his stock by not playing him? Like, that it just doesn't make any sense at all.
And again, this isn't like even like a Jack Eichel situation where he was trying to force the Sabres' hand.
He was hurt. He was injured. So
he wanted to play hockey. The Sabres were battling him on what he could do for his injury, and they were finally able to get out of it.
Right. But again, that's that.
But the Sabres weren't like, we're not playing you because you're being unreasonable. He was hurt.
Right.
And Vegas just like, yeah, we'll let you do what you need to do. Like, it's a totally, like, I just don't see Marner it coming to that. Does it suck? Would it suck if they went into the year without a deal done and having to do this dance? Yes. But the Leafs are not going to do that. They, if anything, we've always said that the Leafs have been too nice to Marner, and I don't see that changing all of a sudden.
Yeah. Completely agree. All right, I think there was one more Marner question in here that, I'll be honest, I didn't really understand. So I'm going to read it to you, and you can let me know what this person is asking me. John Cherry 69. Nice. Question for podcast discussion. If Marner does not get what he is looking for in a sign-in trade and goes to free agency, how close do you think Detroit or even one of the other division teams can come to climb the standings further and potentially knock the Leafs out of contention if all they can do is fill holes with bargain players and crossing their fingers? So I don't know if this person is kind of just confused that Marner's going to be a free agent this summer. Like, they've got to sign him where he's a free agent, but that's not the case. He is under contract next year. When we talk about signing Mitch Marner, It's to extend him into the following season. He's already going to be playing this year for the Maple Leafs. So maybe he's referring to in 2 years from now, but I have no idea what the league is going to look like and what the teams are going to look like in 2 years from now to really answer this question. I don't know if you've got a more thoughtful answer, I guess, but
I think I get where they're coming. Like, let's say they don't do the sign and trade and he just goes to free agency next year. Like, maybe we talk about the scenario where, let's say he's gone, like Marner's not here after next year and leaves in free agency. Yeah, the Leafs eventually are going to have to figure out what they're going to do to fill that void for Marner. No, they're not. It's good. I mean, they could try to find a guy that's, I don't know who would be a free agent in the same year as Marner. Didn't really look that far ahead. You could say, okay, Marner's leaving. Maybe we go after this player instead. We don't like that's option one. It doesn't necessarily mean they're just going to go and spend the money on guys that aren't worth it. But we've also seen teams flourish by finding guys, like look at Florida right now. You find an Evan Rodriguez, you find a you find a Forsling. You find guys that all do something to help you win. So I don't know if just because you lose Marner, yes, it could potentially hurt the Leafs to lose a Marner. That's very true. Am I worried that all of a sudden now a team below them in the standings is just going to knock them off? These teams are also getting better, and they could also do that just because they are getting better, even with Mitch Marner here. Detroit's got a lot of young, promising players, but it's going to take them time to get there. We just saw what happened this year at Detroit. They didn't have the complete team around some of these young core guys. So I don't think that's going to be the total reason, in my opinion.
No, I mean, Detroit, Buffalo, Ottawa, all these teams. I mean, Montreal is expecting to be big players in free agency this year. If they go and get themselves a couple of studs, they could look to, the way that Slafkovsky came on at the end of the year. You get Doc healthy, you get Newhook healthy, Cole Caulfield, who had a down year, if he picks back up next season. Montreal is a team who could somewhat compete maybe for one of those wild card spots. Or at least be tough to get points off of. There's a lot of teams in the Atlantic that are going to make things difficult for the Leafs for many years. So, yeah, I mean, if Marner leaves, depends on what they do with the cap space, I suppose. Depends who's out there. But that's 2 years from now. Two years from now, Mike and Dave can worry about that that question there. We've got one more question, and this is from James Young, 1047. Mailbag question. Assuming McCabe has another strong year, what would his next contract look like? If you were management or an agent, what comparables would you use in negotiations? All right, so Jake McCabe, what would his contract look like next season, or what comparables would we use? So I've got a couple in mind. So his current AAV is $4 million. He had 8 goals this year, 20 assists. Pretty solid season for him. We know he's mostly known for his defensive acumen and toughness, as opposed to his goal scoring points. But it'll be 31. And if we're talking about comps, if you're the Maple Leafs, you probably look at a guy like a Jamie Alexiak. Does that make sense for like a Jake McCabe comp?
Yeah,
Jamie Alexiak,
Adam Larson, maybe.
Yeah, like kind of somewhere in that range. Like Alexiak made $4.6 million, which was 5.64% of the cap the year he signed it, which would equate to, if we're thinking 2 years ahead again, about $5.2 million contract for Jake McCabe. If he plays similar to the way he did this year and does that again next year, I think about a little over $5 million would sound about right for your number 4 defenseman who's going to have the toughness that teams are yearning for. So I think that's probably the comp that I'm looking for. But, an Alexiak who makes about 5.5% of the cap.
Yeah, I think with salaries going up too, that'll impact that, and just your a lot of teams will like a Jake McCabe. With the way that the playoffs are going, a guy like him is going to be a premium. So you're going to pay a premium price, a guy that's proven to play both the left and right side as well.
Yeah.
I think that always increases a player's value. So, I mean, TJ Brody got $5 million a year. Like there's some comparables in terms of what their roles are. Obviously, play style is a little different, like in terms of how they play, but I think their roles are pretty similar.
I'll be curious. A player that I'm going to be looking for, I think McCabe will probably get a little bit more than this player, but depending on what maybe like Zadorov signs this offseason, like I think you're looking at that potentially and being like, all right, we're X amount better than Zadorov. Like we're $1 million better than Zadorov. So if he signs for whatever, $4 million, then like for sure he's a $5 million player or whatever it may be. That's kind of a guy. But if you're McCabe's camp, a little different. You're going to be shooting a little bit high. And a couple of names that I saw, Gavrikov, who signed for 5.875 would make some sense there. It's like a defensive first top 4 defenseman. Travis Sanheim out in Philly made 6.25 this past year. You get a little less than a Sanheim potentially. So that's probably what McCabe and his camp will be asking for, where the Leafs will be closer to the Alexiak number, I'm sure. And they'll have to come to some agreement somewhere in between, I would imagine. But yeah, that's if I had to guess right now, Jake McCabe, if he had another solid year like he did this past, what would his contract be? I would imagine somewhere between 5 and 5.5, multi-year deal. That would be my guess.
It wouldn't be that far off. I think with the way the cap's going up and defenseman being a premium, he's going to get a raise. And some people might think that's nuts, but he's been a solid defenseman ever since he came to for the last few years. So
he's definitely getting a raise from the Maple Leafs because he's only making $2 million in AAV over the next for the past couple of years for Toronto. One of the few great trades that was kind of the parting gift from Kyle Dubas. Gave us McCabe for a couple of years at $2 million bucks. All right, cool. So we've completed our mailbag now, so I'm glad we were able to finish those off and answer those questions for everybody who submitted. Thank you so much. We'll definitely have to get another one in probably after free agency, maybe before free agency. If there's like a free agent frenzy style, like we could do just like a segment or two, perhaps. I don't know. We'll definitely do a few throughout the off season. You guys can get some questions in. But that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. For myself on X at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow. Big day, Game 5, Edmonton and Florida. So we'll help tee that game up for y'all as well. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.